During the early morning hours of July 16, 2010, in the typically peaceful town of Pico Truncado, a startling incident took place. The body of Johanna Casas, a 20-year-old model and former local beauty queen, was discovered in an isolated area. She had been fatally shot twice. The main suspects in the homicide were Marcos Diaz, her partner up to the day she was killed, and Victor Cingolani, her former boyfriend. However, the case would soon take an even more sinister turn. Johanna Casas was born in Pico Truncado, a small town located in the northern region of Santa Cruz province in Argentina. The town received its name from a nearby flat-topped hill. From that vantage point, the oil wells, the area's primary industry, can be seen. Although her precise birth date is not officially documented, family posts on social media and news articles indicate that she was born on July 19, 1990. Johanna was not the only child born that day. 15 minutes after her birth, her twin sister Edith came into the world. They were the eldest daughters of Marcelina del Carmen Orellana and Valentin Casas, who also had another child together. Valentin, a police officer, eventually separated from Marcelina, but he remained very active in his children's lives. The twins bore an extraordinary resemblance to one another. They had the same facial features, physique, and even similar voices. They even shared part of their names, as their parents gave the younger twin the name Edith Johanna. They were so alike that their mother would occasionally confuse them, sometimes even changing the same baby's diaper twice. The sisters shared a unique twin connection. Edith once said that they were able to sense when something was happening to the other. For example, when Edith was 11 years old, she was involved in an accident while she was with her mother in a nearby city. She remained in a coma for several days, and when she regained consciousness, she repeatedly asked for Johanna. Valentin told her that Johanna, who had been with him in their hometown, felt as though Edith was calling out to her. As they got older, the twins grew into attractive young women with very distinct personalities. Edith was more quiet and reserved, whereas Johanna was outgoing and had an interest in fashion and makeup. This passion for fashion led Johanna to pursue a modeling career. She took part in fashion shows and traveled to larger cities, such as Bahia Blanca, where she was once crowned the beauty queen of Pico Truncado. In the middle of 2006, when Johanna was only 15 years old, she met a local young man named Victor Cingolani, who was 21 at that time. They encountered each other one afternoon at the town's bingo hall, where Johanna was accompanied by her father and brother. Victor was seated at a different table with his mother and a friend. He later said that he noticed Johanna glancing in his direction several times. Victor was known in town for being very charming and something of a ladies' man. He put in long hours at the oil company and used his spare time to go out with friends, frequently preferring local brothels instead of bars. He claimed to have been with more than 40 women who, according to him, came to him easily. That day at the bingo hall, after they exchanged glances, Victor felt confident that he could begin something with her. He stated that Johanna made the first move by approaching him and handing him a note with her name and phone number written on it. He immediately sent her a text message, and they began communicating. They went out together a few times and soon officially became a couple. Marcelina, in spite of the age gap between Johanna and Victor, accepted their relationship. She preferred this rather than her daughter spending time unpredictably with other people. They remained together for roughly a year and a half. As time passed, Johanna's parents began to observe Victor's aggressive conduct toward her. There was an episode in which Victor, while attempting to strike Johanna, accidentally shattered a window and injured his own hand instead. The situation became even more complicated when Victor and Johanna ended their relationship and he began dating Edith. Victor stated that his feelings for Edith developed gradually, and that he was never romantically involved with both sisters at the same time. While he was in a relationship with Johanna, Edith was seeing another young man, and at times the four of them would go out together. There were also occasions when Victor invited Johanna out, and Edith accompanied her because she was alone at home. Victor was attracted to Edith's quieter and more reserved personality. She was just as beautiful as her sister, but more simple. Even after his relationship with Johanna came to an end, he continued communicating with Edith. Eventually, They confessed their feelings to one another, but Edith wanted to speak with Johanna about it beforehand. Johanna told her sister that they were adults and understood what they were doing, so she did not object to their relationship. However, the close connection between the twins changed. When Edith began dating Victor, the friends they had in common gradually grew distant, and each sister developed her own circle of friends. Victor and Edith eventually ended their relationship, and Victor began seeing another local woman. Both sisters continued to experience complicated relationships after Victor. When Victor ended yet another relationship 2 years later, he contacted Johanna again. At that time, she was involved with someone else, but she quickly ended that relationship to reunite with Victor. This reconciliation was short-lived, lasting only 2 months because Johanna wanted to have children, while Victor did not. After that, Johanna began dating a man named Marcos Diaz, whom her parents did not like. The Diaz family was surrounded by rumors, including a grave accusation that one of Marcos's brothers had killed his own child. Marcos had a reputation for violence and was known to be possessive and controlling. He was extremely jealous, continually sending Johanna messages and not permitting her to go out by herself. In spite of these warning signs, they moved in together after only 6 months of being in a relationship. During this time, Victor renewed his relationship with Edith, confessing that he had never truly moved on from their breakup. This ongoing back and forth between the sisters would eventually lead to a chain of dramatic, tragic, and scandalous events. On July 15, 2010, for days before their 19th birthday, Johanna went out to a party with Marcos and stayed until around 3 in the morning. She was last seen alive as the two of them left the venue together. Early the following morning, a local resident walking his dog found Johanna's lifeless body in an open field approximately 3 miles from the town center. The location, known as the forest belt of Pico Truncado, quickly became the center of intense police activity as word spread that one of the Casas twins had died. The autopsy later showed that Johanna had been shot at close range, the bullet striking her in the heart and passing between the second and third ribs. Within hours after the discovery, police took Victor and Marcos into custody as the primary suspects in the crime, due to their connections to the victim. Investigators believed the killing had been a planned act carried out by both men, theorizing that Johanna had wanted to end her relationship with Marcos, and the men decided that if she would not be with them, then she would not be with anyone. Marcos was freed a week later because of insufficient evidence, even though he had been the last person seen with Johanna the night before. Soon after, authorities discovered DNA on a cigarette, but at the scene where Johanna was killed. Unfortunately, by that time, Marcos had already fled, and it would take more than 6 months before he was captured and then placed in pretrial detention. Meanwhile, Victor remained in custody, charged with the murder of his former girlfriend. However, he repeatedly insisted on his innocence. According to his statements, on the morning of July 16th, he had been at the casino and then at a friend's house until 6 a.m. Surprisingly, his arrest and the charges that followed did not entirely break off his relationship with Edith. Victor later recounted that on his first night in prison, he asked for a phone so he could call Edith and tell her he had nothing to do with her sister's death. He also wanted to say how much he longed to see her again. However, Edith hung up as soon as she recognized his voice, then changed her number, and he was unable to contact her again. Victor, trying to see Edith once more, asked to be taken to the hospital, claiming he had a headache. On the way, he saw Edith walking hand in hand with another man, suggesting that their intense relationship had come to an end. Edith later shared that she was going through a difficult time. She was grieving her twin, the person closest to her, and dealing with her own inner turmoil. She felt ignored and over-medicated. 2 years after Johanna's death, in mid-2012, Victor stood trial for her murder, facing charges that portrayed him as abusive and controlling. The prosecution's case was built on 3 main pieces of evidence. The first was the paraffin test, conducted on Victor's hands immediately after his arrest, which detected gunpowder. The second was evidence from tracking dogs that placed him at the crime scene. Lastly, Victor's alibi fell apart, as he could not confirm his whereabouts during the time of the crime. Victor's lawyer pushed back, asking the higher court to dismiss the evidence because of serious investigative errors, including a supposed audio recording of the judge in the case acknowledging mistakes made by the inexperienced local police. Despite these challenges, the trial began on June 18, 2012. The prosecutor sought a 20-year sentence due to the alleged use of a firearm, while another suggested 15 years, and Victor's defense argued for his complete acquittal. Victor chose not to testify. The courtroom heard from several witnesses. Johanna's father accused Victor of past violent behavior and threats toward his daughter, recounting a time he overheard Victor on a speakerphone call threatening Johanna. A woman who lived near the crime scene mentioned that her son was the only one home that night and noted the delayed police response. The person who found Johanna testified that he saw no blood at the scene. Another witness spoke about Victor's complicated relationships with the twins, suggesting that he saw Edith as a substitute for Johanna. Edith herself took the stand, having attended every day of the trial wearing a t-shirt demanding justice for her sister. She testified that Victor had been physically abusive toward both her and Johanna and claimed that he had coerced them into intimate relations. Finally, she stated that she believed Victor had played a part in Johanna's death, calling him a psychopath. The hearings came to an end, and on June 27, 2012, Victor was sentenced to 13 years in prison for simple homicide. However, the controversy surrounding the case was far from over. Despite his conviction for Johanna's murder and the serious accusations against him, Edith later shocked everyone by announcing that she had resumed a relationship with Victor. It remained unclear how this reconciled relationship had come about, but at some point, Edith became convinced of Victor's innocence and believed that the true perpetrator of the crime against her twin sister was Marcos, who was in pretrial detention awaiting his trial. When asked about her sworn testimony, Edith claimed that she had been pressured by her parents to make those accusations. Regarding the evidence presented by the prosecution, Edith sided with the defense. Just as Victor's lawyer had argued during the trial, there was never any conclusive evidence placing Victor at the crime scene. He also highlighted significant issues with the paraffin test that had been used as part of the investigation, emphasizing that the procedure was far from reliable. Notably, the test had been conducted without any expert witnesses present to ensure proper protocol and validity, which raised questions about the credibility of the results. In addition, the officer responsible for administering the test failed to follow basic safety procedures. He did not wear gloves, potentially contaminating the evidence, and alarmingly, he even used his teeth to cut the adhesive tape that was supposed to collect residue. Despite these procedural lapses, the results showed that Victor had the highest concentration of gunpowder on his right hand, a detail that the prosecution heavily relied upon. Victor offered a plausible explanation for this finding, stating that he had recently been inside his brother-in-law's truck, a vehicle frequently used for hunting trips. He explained that his brother-in-law often left bullets and gunpowder traces on the seats, which could have easily transferred onto his hands without him handling any firearms directly. Regarding the use of tracking dogs at the scene, the defense further challenged the reliability of the evidence, pointing out that out of the 3 dogs deployed, 2 had returned negative results while only 1 indicated a positive identification. Moreover, there were no independent witnesses to corroborate the dogs' findings, making the results even more questionable. The defense also stressed that human scent is not ephemeral. It can linger at a location for up to a month, meaning that a positive indication by a dog does not definitively place a suspect at the scene on the day of the crime. Victor claimed that the entire trial had been rigged, suggesting that in Santa Cruz, anyone could be convicted just to satisfy the victim's family's demands. While in prison, Victor took up carpentry, stating that Johanna's death had changed him, leading him to give up his partying and drinking habits. Meanwhile, Edith had moved in with Claudia, Victor's sister, possibly because of estrangement from her own family after she chose to reconcile with the man convicted of her twins' murder. Together, they sold chairs, stools, tables, magazine racks, portraits, and paintings that Victor made in prison. With the money, he bought a pair of rings. During a prison visit, Victor proposed to Edith, and she accepted. As expected, Edith's engagement to the man imprisoned for killing her sister was devastating news for the twins' parents, who could not understand what was happening. For them, Victor had murdered one daughter and was destroying the other. At that point, Marcelina made a chilling declaration. It was as if Edith had also died. The physical woman remained, but the sister Marcelina once knew had vanished behind the walls of her sister-in-law's home. Since moving in, Edith had become a ghost to her own kin, her presence reduced to whispered rumors and unanswered calls. She was convinced that a systematic brainwashing had turned her daughter against her, fueled by a deep-seated paranoia that Claudia was never truly alone. In Edith's mind, Claudia was being held in a state of constant surveillance, a captive of influence who wasn't allowed a single moment of independent thought. When the engagement was announced, Edith's family filed a legal injunction to try to prevent the marriage, claiming that the 23-year-old was mentally unstable and fearing for her safety. The wedding was originally scheduled for December 5, 2012, when Victor had only served about 6 months of his sentence. However, the injunction delayed the ceremony. Despite this, Edith showed no signs of psychological or mental dysfunction that would prevent her from getting married. On February 14, 2013, Victor and Edith tied the knot amid widespread disapproval. Their story, a woman marrying the man accused of murdering her twin sister, grabbed headlines around the world. An Argentine journalist known for his bold reporting style won the exclusive coverage with a bid of $1,500. Journalists from countries like Germany and the USA flocked to their small town, and major media outlets such as the BBC and the Daily Mail covered the story. Edith even received offers from Playboy magazine and was invited to join Argentina's top TV show, Dancing for a Dream, but she turned them all down. On their wedding day, just before noon, the couple headed to the civil registry office in Pico Truncado, which was heavily guarded because of the controversy. Chaos broke out when Victor, still incarcerated, arrived in a prison transport. The crowd became unruly, throwing punches, stones, eggs, and tomatoes and shouting insults. The vehicle and the registry's doors were damaged, making the wedding front page news. Despite the chaos, Edith and Victor declared their love and their plans to start a family. Yet, the legal battle over Johanna Casas' murder was far from over. On June 4, 2013, the trial began for Marcos Diaz, who had been held at the Pico Truncado police station. Initially charged as an accessory, Marcos was described in court documents as violent and controlling, known for harassing his girlfriends and often being involved in armed fights. His unexplained trip the day after Johanna's murder was seen as an attempt to escape, and he stopped texting Johanna right after her supposed time of death, suggesting he knew she was gone. This stood in sharp contrast to his frequent texts to her the day before. DNA from a cigarette butt and a music CD found near Johanna's body linked Marcos to the scene and were key pieces of evidence against him. During the trial, Edith, supporting Victor, tearfully accused Marcos of killing her sister. Valentin, the twins' father, also testified, recalling the last time he saw Johanna with Marcos and describing him as a dangerous man involved in cult-like activities, often seen causing trouble at the cemetery. Marcelina, for her part, described the accused as obsessive over her daughter. He never allowed her to be alone, not even to attend family parties. However, the proceedings took an unexpected turn when the prosecutor expanded the accusations. He argued that Marcos was the actual perpetrator of Johanna's murder and the only one present at the scene when her life was taken. As a result, on July 2, 2013, the court sentenced Marcos Diaz to 12 years in prison for the homicide of Johanna. At this point, 2 individuals had been convicted for the same crime, each found guilty by different courts. Following the verdict, Marcos expressed dissatisfaction with the sentence, reaffirmed his innocence, and claimed he had been convicted because there was no one else to investigate. On the other hand, Edith expressed relief and happiness that justice had finally been served. Meanwhile, the twins' mother chose not to speak to the media, while their father voiced his disagreement with the ruling. Victor's lawyer announced plans to seek his immediate release, asserting that they had always maintained his innocence. If the evidence truly confirmed that Marcos was the only one at the crime scene, his client would be released immediately. Ultimately, on December 5, 2013, the Higher Court of Justice announced Victor's release due to insufficient evidence to convict him. After his release, Victor sought compensation from the state, requesting $75,000 for his wrongful imprisonment. However, he received no payment. Over time, Marcelina began to reconsider her view of the events and eventually accepted that Victor had not been involved in Johanna's murder. Although the marriage between Edith and Victor lasted several years, by 2021, it was known that they had separated. She was living with a new partner and was expecting her first child, while he had rebuilt his life with another woman. After more than 2 decades of tangled romantic relationships, a brutal crime, and a couple of equally controversial trials, the case of Johanna Casas seemed to have finally reached a conclusion. Nevertheless, to this day, there are still those who debate the facts and continue to question whether Victor was truly innocent of the events of July 16, 2010, or if he managed to escape unpunished from one of Argentina's most sensational crimes. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.